Ray Bradbury talked about this idea that thinking is the enemy of creativity. In fact, let me read the quote. He said, "Don't think. Thinking is the enemy of creativity." This idea that you let ideas die when they are interrogated prematurely is something that as authors we need to take into consideration. Let the world build itself out before we slow it down. Because sometimes there's this physics principle, right, where the moment you try, you can't know both the location and the speed of a quantum particle, something like that, right? The moment you put a fine lens on it and try to box it in, it stops doing what it's supposed to. Our job, I believe, as writers, is to let our mind play with ideas and then observe, be a casual observer of what's possible. The reality is we want to do this thing that we want readers to do to our work. We need to do to the idea first. Suspending our disbelief. Suspend your disbelief about the idea. Let it let it grow legs. Let it fumble around, make a mess. Create the Frankenstein of a story, right? Frankenstein's monster, to be exact, right? Create Frankenstein's monster. Try to stabilize him, of course, so he doesn't hurt himself, but let him do his thing. Let him explore his boundaries, right? Write the story in a way that you create this snowball effect. You want things to be dynamic. You want the snowball to start rolling and kind of generating ideas as it's moving along. You don't want to create an environment that's restrictive. And I think in many ways, intelligence slows things down, right? Intelligence, you can intelligently speed things up, but I think sometimes when we are very rational about what can and cannot happen, we immediately force our ideas into boundaries and rules. The creative spirit knows no bounds. The subconscious is not limited by the conscious man's understanding of the world. You forget a lot of dreams, and I might be wrong about this, but I think you will understand the spirit once I say this, the spirit of this message. You'll find out that in the dream world, a lot of things make sense because it's just there's no rules. The subconscious is just plowing away. It's just like plopping left and right, and it's doing its thing. It's having this snowball effect. It's becoming this Frankenstein's monster, and it's just doing things boundless, creating its rules as it's going along, and it makes sense to you because you're in the realm of the story that is generating the field of ideas, right? A field of rules, a field of rules, right? That's being generated as the story is going along. That's why dreams and storytelling are so remarkably linked. But then when you wake up, some of those ideas don't make sense, and they made plenty of sense. They made perfect sense when you're in the dream state. I think the same thing applies to people who want to tell remarkable stories. And I don't mean stories that follow structure and follow things perfectly. And these are the elements. Sometimes those things restrict us. I believe that, and I want to experiment, and I want to prove that. I love writing, and honestly, I, I think I've kind of lost that excitement I had for writing at the beginning, and I want to get back there. And this, for me, feels like that beginning. It's like really, uh, really understanding the heart of storytelling. It's about ideas. It's about exploring ideas, communicating ideas, creating laboratories for your Frankenstein's monsters to do their things. And then you find that they are not dark creatures, they are actually lovable entities that have their own weird shape, but you have a hand in making sure they can safely step into the world. And sometimes intelligence is too scary, right, for the creative, childish idea. It needs to percolate, it needs to expand and grow. Once you see that it's expanded, then you can chisel away. And I think this will prevent a lot of writer's block, is when you let the idea of your story just create its own rules. And then things, Lego bricks of new ideas can easily be attached to it, to existing ideas, because the fields generated, the field of rules generated allows you to continue to acquire more and more stories. Yeah, so those are things that I think of intuitively, but I think I've written them down in a way that hopefully makes some sense. So we must be careful about our intelligence and how it impacts our writing. So I'm basically saying get out of your way, right? Get out of your way. Or better yet, get out of the idea's way. Just be non-judgmental about the idea, right? I think a lot of times you write a story and you're like, oh my gosh, is that a reflection of me? I hope so. I mean, I hope you're, I hope it tells you exactly who you are. But sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes it's just an experiment, right? But we really need to be careful to ensure that, first of all, not every idea should be written down. Let me just say that as a disclaimer. But we should be careful to ensure that whatever we're writing is an idea that makes sense to ethically to help. Ideas are meant to help people. They're meant to shape a world that could possibly be. So I hope all of this makes sense. And then you take all of this and you're working on your idea. You're writing down your story, and you're thinking, okay, what about plotting versus being a pantser? I think there's something to be said about when when you should strategically enter into your story and say, you know what, now is the time for me to rein this monster in, right? Rein this thing in, so that I've seen enough of its boundaries and its scope. Now it's time to really close things off. And sometimes we do that instinctively. We start to know, I know where this needs to go, right? And you take the horse by the reins and you direct it where you want it to go. But at the beginning stages, you want it to generate its own idea, its own field. You want it to tell you what it wants to become before you get involved. You want to be a casual observer. And I think that's super important. Strategic, right? You seemingly casual observer. So you don't enforce bias, right? You don't, you're very non-judgmental and you're not saying it has to be a certain way. This stifles innovation. The idea does not need to be what it has always been, what other people have always thought it could be. It could just be a, a combination of all your own ideas, right? Or step out of the way and just say, assuming it could even be an exercise that says, assuming this idea is its own thing. What's the weirdest thing that could happen? Where can it go? assuming I don't care whether there's three acts or a hook and a third act. If I just want the story to be its best version, how can I get it? Where can it go, right? How can I just let it answer its own questions? And I think that's a way to organically let a story feel like it's never been done before. And a lot of times people look at stories and they're like, this is just a modification of something I've heard before. And then you see another story that is pretty much that, but it's just, you're just like, have I ever watched this? This is a breath of fresh air. Have I ever read this? This is a breath of fresh air. I think of all of these 7 things that I've written down, the most exciting thing for me here is number 5. Let the story generate its own rules. And I think that's a very big part of this. Don't let your intelligence dictate the rules of a story. Let the story come up with its own ideas, no matter how ridiculous it sounds. And I said, similar to a dream, when you're dreaming, your subconscious is not only creating the dream, it's also generating the rules of the plane you're in. And that's why it makes sense to you. Until you wake up back to reality and your conscious brain enforces the physical realm's reality, then the subconscious idea starts to look a little crazy, look wacky. But you loved it when you were dreaming. The same thing goes, I think, for storytelling. When you're writing that story, learn, and it's something that we have to practice, you know, learn to be unbiased and to step away and just take note of what is happening with this thing that is so interesting to you. We can have that doesn't require us to introduce something that's always existed. Some things to think about. So yeah, I hope this is helpful. Like, subscribe, comment. And I want to write better stories that I've written in the past, more exciting ones too. So subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.